Was Jesus born in a cave? Now, if you ask any Christian this question, where was Jesus born? Even a Sunday school child, they would immediately answer, Bethlehem, in Bethlehem, because most of them they know the prophecy of Micah that Jesus would be born in the town of Bethlehem. And these stories are so popular that even any Christian, including a child, could answer this simple question. However, if you press it a little further and ask, where in Bethlehem was Jesus born, the exact location of Jesus' birth, then you might get different answers. Do you know that some people believe that Jesus was born in a cave in Bethlehem? In fact, Holy Land travel is quite common among Christians, right? Christians from all over the world, across all denominations, make pilgrimages to the Holy Land to see the places mentioned in the Bible. So one of the must-visit places would be the town of Bethlehem, because everyone knew that's the town Jesus was born. So who would leave the Holy Land without visiting the actual birthplace of Jesus Christ? Now, if you happen to visit the town of Bethlehem in Palestine today, you will most likely be led to this church, the Church of Nativity. The tour guides there would claim that this church was built on the very location where Jesus was born 2,000 years ago. But to see the exact place where Jesus was born, they would say you will have to go down to a lower level, okay, kind of an underground, a basement level within the Church of Nativity through the stairs. Now, there in the underground, there is a cave structure beneath the church. It's called the Grotto, or the Cave of Nativity. If you look at it closely, it remains decorated with several ancient-looking oil lamps, 15 of them to be exact. This is the altar of Nativity. Now you look at this picture here, and I have pointed out where the grotto is located, or the cave is located. Now, this is the altar of Nativity, right? Right below the altar of Nativity, you can see a star on the ground, on the floor, right? It's a 14-pointed star, referring to 3 sets of 14 generations from Abraham to Jesus, as it is mentioned in the first chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. At the center of the star, look closely, and you will see there is a hole. And that it's said to be the exact location of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, according to tradition. A caption is inscribed around the star in the inner rims. You can see the caption reads as follows: Hic die Virgini Maria Jesus Christus natus est, 1717. Here of the Virgin Mary, Jesus Christ was born. The 1717 referred to the year in which this star was placed in that spot. Now, that's an extraordinary claim. How did we get to know the exact location of the place where Jesus was born? Now, to know that, we need to look back into the history of the Church of Nativity. So here we're going to take a brief overview of the Church of Nativity. Now, the cave structure, which you see in the underground, is an ancient, or it's much older. The Church of Nativity was actually built over the cave. Now, you might remember after the First Council of Nicaea in AD 325, Empress Helena, the mother of Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, she went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land in the year AD 325 to 326. Based on the local traditions, she, that is Empress Helena, identified the site of Jesus' birth, the current cave where Jesus was, she identified that place as the site of Jesus' nativity, or Jesus' birth. And soon after that, the original Church of Nativity was constructed there by the approval of the Emperor Constantine. A decade later, it was dedicated on May 31st, AD 339. This church was later destroyed during the Samaritan revolt in the 6th century, which is AD 529. Later, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian rebuilt it. He retained the core central structure, but expanded the church to its current form. As you see from the aerial shot, you see this cross structure, right? That was probably from the period of Emperor Justinian, the Byzantine Empire emperor. So today, the Church of Nativity remains as one of the, if not the oldest existing churches in the world. This church is mainly under the care of Greek Orthodox Church, also Armenian Orthodox Church, and Armenian Apostolic Church and Roman Catholic Church. They also have some smaller properties within this church complex, and so they play some smaller roles in administering the church and its premises. Now, enough with the history. Let's go back to address the central question. We need to ask this most important question. Is this the actual place where the eternal God enfleshed and entered into our mortal world? Was Jesus born in this cave, which is under the Church of Nativity? Or was Jesus born in a cave? Now, let's try to find the earliest mention of the cave birth tradition. Then we will try to understand some of the rationale, the reasons, arguments in support of this cave birth tradition. And then we will look at the Bible, the New Testament in particular, about the actual place of Jesus' birth on the night of the first Christmas. First, let's turn our attention to the earliest references to a cave birth tradition, or to the belief that a cave was the place of Jesus' birth. Here I want to present you 5 early sources. That is, both some of them are books, gospels, anonymous authors, and some of them are written by well-known authors. And these 5 ancient sources, they believe that Jesus was born in a cave. Those who argue that Jesus was born in a cave often make reference to one of these or several of a few of these early sources. The first one is the Infancy Gospel of James, which is a very later book from the mid or late 2nd century. And then Justin Martyr's book, Dialogue with Trypho, Origen, Contra Celsum against Celsus, and Eusebius, Life of Constantine, and Jerome, Letter to Paulinus. So these 5 sources, as you can see, from AD 150 to 395, you see the tradition, how the tradition develops, the belief about the cave birth tradition develops. We can take a look closely. Let's go one by one. The first one is the Infancy Gospel of James. Now, this is known also as the Gospel of James or the Proto-Evangelium of James. For some of you, we are only used to the 4 Gospels in the Bible. As soon as you hear the word Gospel of James, don't assume that it was equally considered, or it was considered equal with the Gospels in the Bible. It's a much later book that simply took the title Gospel to have more influence. Early church, in fact, rejected this book as heretical. It's important to remember that in the beginning. Now, though it claims to be written by James, the brother of Jesus, it's definitely not a book that's written in the 1st century. There are several references where the writer doesn't understand the Jewish customs of the 1st century. It's very clear that it was composed much later, and therefore it was not included. The early church, as I said, it rejected this writing and called it heretical. An important early scholar, Origen of Alexandria, he said this Gospel of James is untrustworthy. In fact, in the 5th century, Pope Gelasius, he said this is one of the books to be avoided by the Catholics. See, this book did not enjoy that much popularity in its early years. But later on, the references and stories from this book would be used to support this cave birth tradition. Now, this Infancy Gospel presents Joseph as the widower, and he has 2 children before he gets married to Mary. So he takes this pregnant Mary to Bethlehem to be enrolled in the census, riding on a donkey. Along the way, before reaching Jerusalem, Mary gets birth pains, right? And Joseph feels very helpless. And this is what in chapter 17, it says, Mary says that I'm getting this pain. Please allow me to get down from this donkey, or help me to get down from this donkey. And then Joseph took her down off the ass and said to her, whither shall I lead thee? For the place is desert. Because they did not reach Bethlehem yet. They were still along the way. And then the very next chapter begins with this verse. And he found a cave there and led her into it. So he led Mary into the cave and leaves her in the cave with his 2 sons, and goes into Bethlehem to bring a midwife, a woman to help with the delivery. As he goes, in the Gospel of James, Joseph notices, and there are several miraculous things are happening, that nature is standing still and everything is kind of freezing in its way. So Joseph already knew that something supernatural is happening. And finally he meets a midwife, and then he has a brief interaction with her, and then she decides to come with him. They hurriedly arrive at the cave, where they witness the miracle of Jesus' birth in the cave. Look at 19, that's what it says. And the midwife went away with him, and they stood in the place of the cave. And behold, a luminous cloud overshadowed the cave. And the midwife said, my eyes have seen strange things. And immediately the luminous cloud disappeared out of the cave. And a great light shone in the cave, so that the eyes could not bear it. And in a little, that light gradually decreased until the infant appeared, and went and took the breast from his mother Mary. You see, the way the Gospel of James explains the birth of Jesus Christ is nothing short of miraculous. It's supernatural. This story is a midrash. It's an elaborate description of Jesus' supernatural birth, drawing a lot of elements from the canonical Gospels or biblical 4 Gospels, and also adding additional extra information into this original material. And this is the Gospel. This is the book that first mentions about the birth of Jesus in a cave. So to sum up, the Infancy Gospel of James doesn't provide any other landmark to identify the exact location. It simply says it's a desert. It's from nowhere. He doesn't say it is right here. So James only mentions a cave, but it doesn't give exact location. It's only a generic reference. Now let's go to the second source, that is Justin Martyr, one of the very well-known early Christian apologists. He makes reference to a cave. And this reference is found in his famous book, Dialogue with Trypho, in chapter 78. This book was written somewhere around AD 155 to 160. So there is usually a discussion whether Trypho got this tradition from the Gospel of James, or the Gospel of James borrowed from Trypho, or both of them, they got it from a different source. This is a matter of discussion. But this is what Justin Martyr says in chapter 78 of Dialogue with Trypho. Let's take a look. But when the child was born in Bethlehem, since Joseph could not find a lodging in that village, he took up his quarters in a certain cave near the village. And while they were there, Mary brought forth the Christ and placed him in a manger. And here the Magi who came from Arabia found him. Look what Justin Martyr thinks. He thinks Joseph and Mary first visited Bethlehem, and they could not find any place to stay in the village. And then Joseph led the pregnant Mary to live temporarily in a cave outside the town of Bethlehem. So it's a different process, right? First they go to the city, a town, they look around, they didn't find, and then they go to take a temporary residence in a cave outside the village or outside the town. However, same like the Gospel of James, Justin Martyr doesn't provide any exact location. He just says in a certain cave. It's a very generic reference. Now, that's what we get from Justin Martyr. He also thinks the Magi came and visited him in that cave, which Bible completely rejects. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 11, we see that the Magi came to the house. It's a very specific reference. So on that point, Justin Martyr is incorrect. Let's go on to the third point. Origen of Alexandria. He's a very renowned Christian scholar, one of the very renowned early Christian scholars, lived in the city of Alexandria in Egypt. And he referred to this cave, and he recalled about it in his book, Contra Celsum, against Celsus, in book 1, chapter 51. This book was written somewhere around AD 250. And this is what Origen says. With respect to the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem, there is shown at Bethlehem a cave where he was born, and the manger in the cave where he was wrapped in swaddling clothes. And this site is greatly talked of in surrounding places, even among the enemies of the faith, it being said that in this cave was born that Jesus who is worshipped and reverenced by the Christians. Now we see the first two references, Gospel of James and Justin Martyr from the 2nd century. They refer to cave in generic terms. There is no reference to an exact location. But Origen, on the other hand, he makes a reference to a specific cave in Bethlehem as the birthplace of Jesus. So we see the tradition has kind of developed further from a generic reference. Now it's coming to a more specific reference. The fourth ancient source that we are going to look at is Eusebius of Caesarea. Eusebius was a bishop of Caesarea, and he's also a renowned early church historian. And perhaps he's one of the most early church historian, we would say. And in his book, The Life of Constantine, book 3, chapter 26, and chapters 41 to 43, he makes a reference to the mystic caves in Bethlehem, where Jesus was thought to be born. Now, in fact, this book, Life of Constantine, was the last book written by Eusebius. The last portions of the book remained incomplete because Eusebius died before completing this book. But still, the early sections he has put together really gives information about the traditions concerning the nativity of Jesus and the caves in Bethlehem. Now, Eusebius points to a local tradition. He says, after the Jewish revolt of AD 132 to 135 in the 2nd century, Emperor Hadrian, he decided to completely Romanize the Jewish and the Christian holy places. So he built Greco-Roman temples over traditional Jewish and Christian holy sites. So he wanted to convert the population to become fully Roman so that these kind of events don't take place in the future, right? So Eusebius points to a local tradition that Hadrian built a temple of Adonis or Tammuz, a Greek and Phoenician gods, over this cave where Jesus was said to be born in order to erase the Christian identity and establish a Roman identity. And during Empress Helena's pilgrimage in the year AD 325, and she, with the help of course, the local people, she identified this pagan temple was actually built over the original place of Jesus' birth. So she kind of recovers that information from the local tradition. And then Eusebius says the Church of Nativity was built on the same place by Emperor Constantine, who destroyed the pagan shrine and built this temple, Church of Nativity, in the early 4th century. Jerome, a few decades after Eusebius in AD 395, he in fact echoes the story of Eusebius in verbatim. In his second letter to the Apollogist of Nola, he says as follows: The original persecutors, he's referring to the Romans, particularly the Emperor Hadrian and others, indeed supposed that by polluting our holy places, they would deprive us of our faith. Even my own Bethlehem, as it now is, that most venerable spot in the whole world, was overshadowed by a grove of Tammuz. Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 14, that is, of Adonis. And in the very cave where the infant Christ had uttered his earliest cry, lamentation was made for the paramour of Venus. So we see Jerome was almost verbatim. He's passing on the tradition that he received from Eusebius, who talks about the earlier, who passes on the earlier tradition. So we see these stories continue to evolve. So what we get from Eusebius and Jerome is that Emperor Constantine built the Church of Nativity on the same location where Emperor Hadrian built a pagan temple to the god Adonis and Tammuz. So here we need to note several Greco-Roman gods were born in caves. In fact, Zeus and Hermes, all these famous Greek gods were said to be born in the caves. So maybe Emperor Hadrian or later Empress Helena could have identified this cave, which is the cave of Nativity now, as the birthplace of Jesus to hold him in high esteem, like other well-known pagan gods. It's possible, right? We started with the Gospel of James, and then we moved on to the dialogue with Trypho. They both make generic reference to the cave outside the town of Bethlehem. The exact place is not mentioned, right? Origen tells us that the cave was in Bethlehem. We see certain development there. So through Eusebius, we come to know the Church of Nativity was built after breaking down the temple of Tammuz or Adonis that Hadrian built, which the tradition says, which was built to cover up the Christian identity. So now later, Jerome passes on the same tradition and others follow it to this day. We also see the inconsistencies between these traditions. The early traditions, they claim that the cave was outside of Bethlehem, in a desert, in a certain cave. We see that cave is not exactly identified. The location of the cave is not exactly identified. But in the later books, later writings, we see the cave is identified to be in the town of Bethlehem. Yes, so Gospel of James and Dialogue with Trypho, a generic reference to a cave outside Bethlehem. Origen tells us of a cave in Bethlehem. Eusebius, he tells that the Church of Nativity was built after dismantling the temple of Adonis and Tammuz that Roman Emperor Hadrian built over the Nativity cave. Later, Jerome echoed and passed on the tradition. So we see this gradual evolution of this cave birth tradition. In the recent times, New Testament commentators, for example, like William Barclay, they think that Jesus must have been born in a cave, but that's not the cave of Nativity. They would say that this cave was part of a first century church house where the animals used to be kept. You look at this picture on the top here. If the house is on the upper level, and then through the stairs, people could go to the lower level where animals could be kept. They would conceptualize a cave structure, something similar to this. The quotation from William Barclay: the houses in Bethlehem are built on the slope of the limestone ridge, and it is very common for them to have a cave-like stable hollowed out in the limestone rock below the house itself. And very likely, it was in such a cave stable that Jesus was born. Now, why modern commentators are they feel the weight to concede to this idea that Jesus was born in a cave? I think there are several reasons. So let's take a look at the arguments in support of Jesus' birth in a cave. Many commentators, they feel that the tradition about the cave birth of Jesus is quite strong. In fact, it is one of the longest tradition starting from the 2nd century, right? So even if they don't agree with the cave under the Church of Nativity, the current grotto, which is extremely deep, and it's highly unlikely animals were kept there, right? If there was manger, there must be animals, which seems like quite unlikely. But they would still concede that it might be a cave under a house like Barclay, because one of the longest continuing tradition really makes them feel they have to concede to this point. They would point out that the first one is cave as a temporary shelter, right? In the ancient times, they looked at caves in different ways. Now, if you say that if someone says, I'm going to live in a cave, we look at them differently today. But in those days, they would claim, the first century people, or people in the ancient time before that, they used caves to live temporarily. You might remember Lot escaped from Sodom and Gomorrah and lived in a cave the rest of his life after escaping from the destruction of Sodom, right? And David lived in a cave when he escaped from Saul, and so on. Even Josephus, the first century historian, he talks about people and refugees and people who are affected by war, bandits, others who live in the caves in the first century Judean land. So living temporarily in a cave might not be as embarrassing or anything like in those days. So those who support that Jesus might have been born in a cave, they point to this particular kind of period in history, and they would say that caves are used as temporary shelters. And there were several caves around the region of Bethlehem where the shepherds would lead their animal to take shelter during a rain or thunderstorm or anything like that. So caves as temporary shelter is possible. In the Old Testament, there are strict laws that tells us that women in those days had to be kept away for 7 days if they deliver a boy child, and 14 days if they deliver a baby girl. Now, Leviticus chapter 12, 1 and 2, the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. So they would say the reasoning why Mary was kept away from the main area used by the rest of the family, and why Mary was allowed to go to this cave-like area, which is away from the house, is that so that she wouldn't make others impure. And there is also another rationale that people who support the cave birth tradition they put forth is this. They would say, why was Mary moved to this cave in the lower level of a house? They would say to avoid scandalous gossips of others. You might remember how Mary conceived this baby. She conceived the baby before she got married to Joseph. It was a miraculous conception. But there were some whispers, there were some murmurs against the way people looked at it from outside. Many people thought it was a scandalous pregnancy that happened before marriage. So when Mary and Joseph moved to their hometown, to keep away from further gossips, the host family sort of moved Mary to the cave part or the lower level of the house. Well, that's one of the arguments. I think another very important argument that is put forth in favor of this cave theory by those who support it is foreshadowing. Now, those who think Jesus was born in a cave, they claim a prophetic foreshadowing. The cave was cut into the surrounding limestone rock, right? Do you remember? Jesus was placed in a rock-cut tomb after he was crucified and died. So to place a newborn baby Jesus on a stone manger in a rock-cut cave, it serves as a powerful foreshadowing of the grim climax this baby Jesus would suffer in the future. And he, just like he was laid in a cave, a rock-cut cave in a manger, his body would be laid in a tomb which is rock-cut in the future. So there is a prophetic foreshadowing. That is what people who support this view would argue. While these rationales, these arguments might sound reasonable, the fundamental question still remains to be addressed. Is there evidence? Is there evidence from the apostolic era, from the first century, for the cave birth tradition of Jesus? Simply. Does the New Testament make any reference to Jesus' birth in a cave? I think this is the most important question that we need to ask. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, there are few references that might help us deduce the place of Jesus' birth. You see, Gospel of Matthew and Luke are canonical Gospels, meaning they were written either by the apostles themselves or by those directly associated with the apostles, thus having an access to the eyewitness accounts of the events. See, Matthew's Gospel, we can date the Matthew's Gospel around AD 70 and Luke's Gospel around AD 80. And both of them draw heavily from the earlier Gospel of Mark, which was written between AD 50 to 60. So you can see these all happened in the lifetime of the apostles. Let's go over some of the references that tells us about the place of Jesus' birth. At least it kind of helps us deduce and derive that information. There are 2 references from Matthew and 3 references from Luke. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod. So we see in Bethlehem, reference to in Bethlehem in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Matthew 2:11 says, on coming to the house, they, the Magi, saw the child with his mother Mary. On coming to the house, there is a reference to a house where Magi visited. Okay, and there are 3 other references in Luke chapter 2, verse 4, Luke 2:11, and Luke 2:15. Let's read 2:4. Joseph belonged to the house and line of David. So that establishes that Joseph belonged to the family, extended family of David. So his genealogy is connecting to the genealogy of Jesus. Jesus' genealogy is connected to the genealogy of David because Joseph belonged to the same family. Now, Luke 2:11, the angel announces the good news to the shepherds. He says, today in the town of David, everyone knew what is the town of David. The town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. So the angel said, today in the town of David, and immediately the shepherds pick it up. They know exactly what is the town of David. 2:15, they said, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem, because they know Bethlehem was the town of David. Exactly, they know the area in which the family of David lived in Bethlehem, because each property in towns were allotted to certain families, and they and their descendants would inherit that properties for generations. So if these shepherds, they exactly knew the family of David, where they lived, because the prophecies, all of them pointed to the son of Messiah as the son of David, Messiah as the descendant of David, who was born in the family line of David. So as soon as the shepherds heard about this news, let's go to Bethlehem and see. Not only go to Bethlehem, they also know which family house, which area to directly go and see the family, extended family of David. And as they go there, they would have encountered the Messiah. They went directly to the family house of David's descendants and found the baby wrapped in swaddling clothes and placed in the manger, just as the angel said. So just pay 2 points to note here. 1, both Gospels tell us the place of Jesus' birth was in Bethlehem, undisputed. But there is no reference whatsoever to any cave in the Gospels. You cannot see a cave here. If at all you see a reference to a house in Matthew 2:11. So let's summarize quickly what we learned or what we looked so far. In the Gospels, no reference to any cave as the place of Jesus' birth, period. In the epistles, apostles didn't make any reference to a cave as a place of Jesus' birth. See, if that information is significant, someone prolific like Paul would have surely mentioned it. If visiting the cave is very important, someone like Apostle Paul, who visited Jerusalem again and again, would have led a group of people to visit Bethlehem. And he did not make any trip to Bethlehem. We see several visits to Jerusalem, but not to Bethlehem. So it means that the tradition was not there, at least in the first century, in the time of the apostles. Apostles didn't make any reference to a cave as a place of Jesus' birth. The third point is the cave tradition began to emerge from the mid to late 2nd century. We see Justin Martyr and Gospel of James. Justin Martyr lived in Italy. Gospel of James definitely written outside of Judea. So both of them were trying to innovate these stories. And now there is a question. These traditions mentioned in Justin Martyr and Gospel of James, did they inherit from some of the older sources from the Promised Land or like the land of Canaan, Israel? Or did they innovate these traditions? Now, there is certain debate about that, but as we can see, only from the middle of the 2nd century to the late period, these traditions began to emerge. But then we also note that Gospel of James is an untrustworthy source, which was kind of rejected by the early church. In the Pope Gelasius, he said this is a book that believers and Catholics should keep away from. The fourth point, only after the visit of Emperor Constantine's mother, Empress Helena, to the Holy Land, the location of the Cave of Nativity got firmly established. No reference in the cave in the Gospels, in the epistles, apostles don't mention it. The cave tradition slowly emerges. Initially, they talk about a certain cave, a cave outside Bethlehem, and then slowly, in the time of Origen in the 3rd century, they talk about a cave which was in Bethlehem. Then, by the time of Constantine's mother's visit to the Promised Land, the place got identified and a church was built. So we see the evolution of the tradition, which is a later development. So let's come back to this question. Was Jesus born in a cave? I think this is time to answer this question, right? After all this consideration, of all this discussion. I would answer the question in negative. I would say no. No, Jesus was not born in a cave. The reason is this. The Nativity cave in Bethlehem, it's not supported. This view is not supported by the New Testament. Simple. The Nativity cave in Bethlehem must be considered as a later post-biblical development. Such a cave birth view is not supported by the New Testament. The Gospels make references to the town of Bethlehem and a house. The shepherds came to the town of Bethlehem, to the family house of David's descendants. The Magi came to the house where Jesus was with Mary. I think the reference, Justin Martyr, who says the Magi visited Mary in a cave, it must be taken as an incorrect reference. So next time, when you happen to go to the cave or the Grotto of Nativity in Bethlehem, if at all you have a chance to visit that place, when you hear claims like this is the exact place where Jesus was born, take that with a pinch of salt. Yes, it is true. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and he lived in 1st century Palestine. The very fact that the eternal God enfleshed himself in a humble Judean home, that is a reminder to us that he cared for the marginalized and the weak. So in this Christmas, let us celebrate the meaning, the mystery, and the message of incarnation. God is with us. Emmanuel, he emptied himself of his glory and restricted himself to a mortal frame. So may Christ's birth inspire us to such kenosis, selfless sacrifice, to bring healing, restoration, and peace to all who are hurting, deprived of hope and future in our world. Prophet Isaiah says in Isaiah 9:6, "For unto us a child is born, and to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace." So let his peace reign in our hearts. Now, if Jesus was not born in a cave, where was he born? You might ask. I try to answer this question in another video. If you're interested, you may check out this video. I will provide the link in the description or above here. What do you think? Do you think Jesus was truly born in the same cave? way on which the Church of Nativity is built? Or do you think it is a later tradition? Whatever it is, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for listening. God bless you all. Merry Christmas. Peace.